Heavy lifting.
Heavy lifting.
Sam's looking very
Hello,
worried.
everyone. Welcome to today's show. Today's topic is the OEM versus the consulting companies, and the topic is going to be around if you are the manufacturing executive. Typically, you are going to be faced with a decision during your digital transformation engagements, and that is going to be whether you are going to be working directly with the software provider. And in the software world, we call them original equipment manufacturers. These are the manufacturers that are actually providing the software versus the consulting company. So typically, you will come across these two scenarios. So we have a very exciting panel today, and I am going to give you a quick brief of the panel. After that, we are going to dig deeper into the topic. Just so you know, this particular panel is part of our digital transformation series. We meet every Thursday at 4:30 p.m. Eastern, and we pick one topic each week around digital transformation. So now going back to our panel, we have Melissa, who is part of IBM organization. She brings a lot of experience overall in the enterprise software space. So we are going to have great insights from her. Then we have Wayne. Wayne has been CIO for what now? 30 years. He is very well known in the CIO community. He has tons and tons of awards, and I will let him describe his awards and achievements. But then we have Martin Davis as well. He's also part of CIO community. He focuses on the operational technology side of things. So he is going to bring a lot of intel from the manufacturing perspective. Then we have Chris. Chris has become regular here, but Chris does a lot of work in the Microsoft ecosystem. He has been doing ERP implementation for roughly 20 years. So he is going to bring a lot of intel in today's conversation just because he sees a lot of contracts and agreements. And then we have Bonnie, and she is part of the Raven Intel organization. She interviews a lot of consulting companies. She does a lot of independent reviews as well. So she's going to get tons and tons of expertise. So now we are going to be starting with the introductions of the panel by themselves. So Bonnie, do you want to introduce yourself first?
Absolutely. Well, thanks for having me. I'm excited about today's conversation. I'm the founder and CEO of Raven Intel. Raven Intel is a peer review site, meaning that we are similar to a Yelp or a TripAdvisor, but what we look at and get customer ratings for is all around project success. I have expertise in talking with over 1,000 customers about their recent digital transformation project, software implementation. There's a lot of different terms that we can use for that, but we measure the outcomes of these projects and the satisfaction overall with the effort to get these big systems live.
Okay, amazing. Thank you so much for the intro, Bonnie. Wayne, do you want to go next with your introduction?
Sure, I think I can follow Bonnie. Awards are irrelevant. I've got 30 years of scars from having done ERPs, from having built systems, from having hired both OEMs and outside companies. I will just say, since we're focused on manufacturing, I started on a factory floor. I was a manufacturing engineer before I got into IT. So I really do feel for what goes on as people try to build things in the real world. And that's what we'll focus on. How do we get productivity to help you in the factory build and sell real stuff?
Okay, amazing. Thank you so much, Wayne, for the intro. Martin, do you want to go next with your introduction?
Oh, thanks, Sam. It's really great to be here. It's an amazing panel, and it's going to be a fun discussion. So, Martin Davis, a lot of background in manufacturing in various kind of companies from large to smaller, but also experience in transportation industry, even in financial services and other ones like that, and consumer goods, etc. So a lot of CIO experience, a lot of IT experience over the years, a lot of ERP scars, as Wayne says, because you talk to any CIO, the projects they dread most are the big ones, the big ERP ones, and they are always painful. So.
Okay, amazing. Thank you so much for the introduction, Martin. Melissa, do you want to go next with your introduction?
Absolutely. I've got 27 years of procurement and supply chain experience. I have been on the consulting side, I have been my own business. I've worked on the provider side, and I've also worked on the user side, sitting behind the desk, at a company. Like Wayne, I've been, walking around the manufacturing floor. I do a lot of work with, manufacturing, retail, consumer goods, and specifically working in cloud technologies since about 2008. So a lot of times what we're hearing now is all these on-premise ERPs are moving to the cloud. So, and someone mentioned a lawyer earlier. I'm not a lawyer, but I do have a paralegal degree.
Oh.
That's amazing. So we do
Yeah.
have a lawyer in the room.
Yeah.
At least the legal representation.
Yeah.
Okay, Chris, do you want to go with your intro now?
Absolutely. Thanks, Sam. So Chris Garridini, I'm the founder and CEO of Turnkey Technologies. We're a 27-year Microsoft ERP and CRM implementation partner. So I've been in the channel as a value-added reseller for 30 plus years. And so again, a lot of experiences. I led the manufacturing implementations at the company. Now there's a lot of smarter people on my team than me, but we're deep. I think 56% of our clients are manufacturing. So look forward to the conversations today, everybody.
Okay, amazing. Thank you so much, everybody, for the introduction. Obviously, it is going to be very helpful for our listeners to know, what expertise you are going to bring to the table. So, Bonnie, I am going to start with you now. We have had really detailed discussion about this topic on one of the podcast episodes that we have recorded. So we had discussed the pros and cons of both of these approaches. So as I mentioned towards the beginning of the conversation, let's say if I'm the manufacturing executive and I am evaluating my ERP or digital transformation engagement, there are many different ways to work with the companies. Now, one of the choices that we are going to get is going to be to work with the software vendor directly. They provide their own services versus in the other case, this is going to be a third party which is providing the services. Now, there could be multiple party involved, but in this particular case, we are really looking at the pros and cons of working with these two approaches. So do you want to start providing the background in terms of what are the pros and cons of both of these approaches?
Absolutely. And I think there's no right or wrong way. It really depends on what's the right best fit potential for the project and the company that you're about to embark on. I think if you, so as you mentioned, you have two choices. You can either use your software vendor to help you implement, or you can enlist a third-party consulting firm to lead that implementation. And the pros, I think, to using your software vendor, in many cases, you might not even have a choice. Maybe that particular software, they fully implement their system. They don't use partners and things like that. In that case, you don't have a choice. But, in many cases, you can use your software provider to implement through their own professional services team. Typically, that's going to be cheaper. And it's going to be basically a lift and shift of systems. It's going to, they're going to go through a process to get you live on the software. And so it's, very sort of a cut and dry sort of methodology. They know the software as good as anyone. They're the one who designed it. And I think a pro is that it's one throat to choke. You can't blame, or the software vendor can't blame the third party if something goes sideways during the implementation. I think the cons, though, for relying on your software vendor to implement your project is they're not going to have the same level of expertise that a third-party consulting firm with. So they might have a very narrow skill set in terms of the software, but they're not going to be able to bring you as wide an expertise with your industry, process re-engineering, change management, some of those things that consulting firms or these partners do this day in and day out versus, they're not in the business, typically of designing software. Their core expertise is providing consulting services. So you're going to get a broader look at your project and, a greater level, I think, if you're doing a transformation of, true transformation capabilities if you were to go through a third party. The other thing that I think is a con when you have your software vendor implementing your software is that they have limited resources. And, if they sell a lot of software, they only have the bench strength of their implementation or PS team versus, there's lots of options that you have. If one consulting firm is too busy, there's 5 others that you can look to if you're looking for a third-party consulting firm. So I think, the availability of talent is larger when you look at, a consulting firm versus software vendor. The consulting firms, what I would say is you're getting a broader look at your project, a broader look at the overall plan, which is great. It probably will be more expensive, and they're going to look at this project as sort of the start of a long-term relationship. Consulting firms make their money not with just implementation, but they want to make sure that you are a customer for life. So they're going to want to build upon the success that you have during implementation so that they can sell you more services later on. So in that way, the dedication to your success, not in all cases, because I have lots of reviews that might suggest otherwise. But in general, they're going to look at the overall success of your implementation and ensure that you are satisfied because they have then the ability to sell you more in the future. Versus a software vendor, they want to get you live so that they can, build the on-call licenses and things like that. But they don't make their money in services. Their money is based on licenses fees. So, typically that's the sort of the differences between those two scenarios.
Okay, amazing. So you definitely touch on many different points there. Number one is going to be one throat to choke. Obviously, you have that pro when you work with the software vendor, but then the cons is going to be you have limited resources because in case of consulting company, you can switch easily. The way the org structure is going to be structured for a software vendor is going to be very different just because they are incentivized to sell their license. And you did mention that the long-term aspect of the relationship in case of consulting companies. So Wayne, I am actually going to move to you next. Do you agree with these points? Do you have anything to add? From your experience, what have you seen? Pros and cons.
Well, yeah, my experience may be a little different. I don't interview a lot of people. I've lived through a lot of these projects. And first, a couple of observations. If you're a major software company, and we talk about, by the way, I'm told in HR, I can't say one throat to choke, it's one hand to shake. Kinder, gentler way. But if you look at a big software company, I promise you the people writing the code over here and the people implementing the code in professional services are not the same people.
Yeah.
They're not even probably in the same part of the organization. They have different profit goals. They have different relationship goals. They may report to completely different managers in the organization. So it's not as cut and dried as the person who wrote the code is going to come out and implement it, number one. Number two, about this one hand to shake, let's say, if I hire a VAR, a value-added remarketer, to implement something, I may not have a relationship directly with Microsoft or with whoever I'm using. If I hired Chris, my contract is going to be with Chris. He might have a contract with Microsoft. And so then he is my throat or hand, and the Microsoft people are his problem. I'll also make a distinction now. It used to be that if I was an implementation partner, I was essentially selling you hours of labor. These days, as software is easier to customize, and we're getting more and more industry specialization, if I want to hire a VAR to implement a horizontal package like ERP, I want a VAR with industry experience. And they might have their own customizations, either their own templates or even their own intellectual property. They become essentially an ISV, an independent software vendor, in addition to a value-added remarketer. So remember, there's three legs to the stool. There's the OEM, the VAR, and the ISV. And as we move to SaaS-based products, more and more we're gluing stuff together to make a solution. But let's cut through this and say, if you're a CFO, I want to ask you a question. Number one, maybe two questions. One, do you think you got the process nailed and you just want somebody to sell you software to implement? In that case, it's not as important. You know what you want built. You just want somebody to get it done quick. And to Bonnie's point, The OEM is very good at getting their software implemented quick. That's what they do for a living. They're not going to be as good at what other add-on products might we consider from other companies, including maybe one of your competitors. If you're not sure what you want to do, and I'll tell you this, if you're doing a brand new ERP and you just want to replace my old ERP with a new one, but it should work the same way, you're a fool. Don't do it. That may be a subject for another podcast. But you want to be thinking about what process improvements you want, in which case you may want a company that's more process focused and less product focused, helping you lead an organizational, cultural, employee experience, customer experience transformation. So there's more to it than just who can do a better job. They each do a good job depending on the job you need done.
So some powerful insights there, Wayne, and completely agree that, if you have your process nailed, then obviously then it's the role of the consulting company is probably not going to be as relevant. And then you can probably hire a VAR and then you are going to be okay. But getting that process nailed is probably a very difficult conversation. It's very, very, very hard to get that nailed, in my experience at least. Couple of other nuances. I think you bring some very important point there, that when you are signing the contract with the consulting company versus, let's say, the VAR, you are really making the relationship with the consulting company. You are not necessarily dealing with the software vendor directly, so they have to deal with them. But in some cases, you might have two different agreements. One could be your implementation agreement. The second could be your software license agreement. And the software license agreement, you might still have to deal with the software vendor, but you might be dealing with the VAR for your VAR, or the consulting company, or the implementation partner for your implementation agreement. Again, there are different kind of arrangements in that that space. The overall, the add-on, the ISP, and obviously in any relationship, I think there are going to be multiple companies involved. Even if you, let's say, want just one hand to shake, it's never going to be that case. So now, Martin, based on this discussion so far, what are your observations? What would you like to add? Any pros and cons here? Obviously, Wayne actually brings a lot of different points here, and Bonnie has highlighted a lot of them. In your experience, do you agree with everything that has been said so far? Do you disagree with anything? What you would like to add?
I think there's a lot of good points that both Bonnie and Wayne have added there. I'll add a couple of extra ones as well.
Yeah.
So if you're dealing directly with an OEM, you can benefit from their increased product knowledge. So that's one area that can benefit you.
Yeah.
But they can also be extremely blind to its issues. In my experience, I've often found that the consulting companies are more aware of the issues and stumbling blocks related to different ERPs and other things like that than the manufacturer. And they can help you, kind of guide you through some of those problems where the OEM can be a little bit blind at times. And then the conversation about, are they any good at consulting? Yeah, any consulting is only as good as the people you get. And you can go to any of the big consulting companies or one of the big software resellers, and you can get good people, you can get bad people.
Yep.
I've even dealt with one of the biggest software companies in the past, and they didn't even know who their own good people were.
Oh.
We actually had, from previous dealings, we actually said we want this person, this person, and this person, because we know they are good. And they don't even, half the time, know who their good people are. So it really depends on who you get. And whoever you choose, you need to choose carefully and actually have the right of refusal when you're contracting. Get them to propose CVs and interview the consultants that are going to come on board, whoever they're coming from, and see if you get on with them, see if they're knowledgeable, see if they actually know their stuff. And I think that's a kind of a key add-on to this discussion, is around carefully choosing who you're working with, whoever they are.
And Martin, I absolutely agree with that. And one of the sort of gotchas is that customers will get the A team during the sales process, but then when it comes time to actually implement, the JV team walks in the door. And so, and Sam and I talked about this earlier this week, where if you can write into the contract the specific team that you will be assigned, that you've already met and vetted during the sales process, that's really big, because if you don't have those sort of that leverage, all of a sudden, you can sort of have the rug pulled out from underneath you, when it's a whole new team that's introduced.
Yeah, and things on top of that, such as if they need to remove, because there will be people that will move on, that you get the right of refusal of the person coming in. And we've even had pieces we put in contracts such as there is a period at which time that new person is free while they're coming up to speed. Yeah, and that could be 3 or 4 months or more, because during that period, they're not going to be adding as much value as the experienced person who's just left the project, who's got all that project knowledge.
Yeah, so some amazing points there, Martin, especially around the team and people. I think that's where the major shortcomings are going to be overall. So understanding, what kind of people are going to be involved with the implementation, and if there are going to be any changes, that's really important. I actually want to go back to one of the points that Wayne mentioned about, the organizations being different from the software perspective and the professional services perspective. So if we look at the broader picture of the company, if you look at the companies that are going to be funded by, let's say, Wall Street, right? They are going to have completely different goals. So even though they might pretend that they have goals for professional services as well as the software license, but as such, the investors, when they are investing their money in these organizations, the only thing they care for is the software license. What is your ARR? What is going to be the license number that you are hitting? So even though you have a tiny weeny professional services organization as part of your software organization, but as such, the investors, the CFOs, they don't necessarily care for that professional services organization. So from the corporation perspective, I guess overall they are not going to be incentivized to sell the consulting services from the OEM perspective. And one of the points that I also want to bring here is going to be related to the contract. I don't know a software company that is actually willing to put the name of the people or the team on the contract who is going to be working on the project. Only consulting companies do that just because that's their business model. They have the billable resources. It's very rare to find. And again, you guys can tell me if you guys have seen with any companies who are actually willing to put the name of the team, their contracts are going to be very lean as well. On that note, Melissa, I want to move to you. From your experience, what have you seen? What are the pros and cons of these two approaches? Do you disagree with everything that has been said so far? Do you agree? Do you want to add anything?
No, I actually have a couple observations. When you look at the OEM is exactly right. They're incentivized by the licensing. They're incentivized by the renewals.
Yep.
They're not going to put any names in there because a lot of times their services aren't an individual dedicated to that project, but perhaps a shared services model, which makes a really big difference between the OEM and the consulting firm. The other observation is that in a box, when you look at the ERP, it's a box, and your OEM is very focused on everything inside the box. Your consulting firm is going to come in and look at everything outside the box as well as inside the box, all the data that comes in before it, everything that happens inside the box, the decisions that are made inside the box and how they impact everything outside of the box. So that's this larger umbrella that we've been talking about, where your OEM will really focus on all of that versus, Bonnie mentioned just the lift and shift. If you've got a dirty data and your processes aren't working, OEMs aren't focused on that. That's not what they're incentivized on. It's a lift and shift of the good and the bad. And then contractually, because I know you wanted me to talk about this. So contractually, your OEM is going to be more focused on the tactical components of that implementation. They're going to be driven on, okay, you're implementing this box. I just want to get you up and running. And you'll find that the details of the contract will go down into, I will actually extend your supplier profile table by 5 fields. What? 5 fields? What if I need more than 5 fields? Oh, well, then we'll pay you. We'll have to, talk about a change order. Maybe you can come in and give us some more money, and we'll extend it by 5 more fields, unless you need more. And so suddenly it's a very tactical conversation versus looking at the consulting, the contracts that come in from the consulting firm. They're value based. They're outcome based, results based. It's what do you want to achieve with this transformation? Not I'm going to go in and only build you out 5 fields, and if you want more, they don't care about how many fields you need. They want to make sure that at the end of this process, you're getting what it is you need out of it. And I think that's a big differentiation between the tactical OEM versus the outcome or the value base that the consulting firms look at.
Yeah, some observations here, especially Melissa, you bring some really important point there, with this approach of inside the box and outside the box. Even if, let's say, the OEMs are claiming that they are, fairly outside the box, there might be some OEMs who that might be claiming that, but the language that they are going to be speaking is going to be very product focused. And the reason why they speak the product language is because they want to promote their brand, and that's in their best interest, which makes sense, because that's how they are taught inside the organization. They need to speak their language. But sometimes for customers it may be harder. You are speaking the language of your product, you are speaking the language of your brand, which is great, but it doesn't serve me, because I am trying to solve my problem. So so this inside the box and outside the box mindset could be extremely tricky when you are working in a project where you have to learn a lot. Not only you have to learn from the functionality perspective. Let's say if you're implementing the ERP for the first time, it's going to be a huge steep curve, and now you have to cross the barrier of understanding your language as well, which could be very hard. So on that
another language.
Yep. Chris, I want to move to you next. What have you observed so far?
Now that I've heard all you guys, it's interesting conjecture. So, and just to validate a few things you said, the big giants, they just want to sell licensing. Services are sometimes a necessary evil for them to peddle the software. And to your point, they're going to try to keep it as lean as possible to fulfill the requirements. I mean, a lot of big companies, they want to do business direct with the OEM because they want skin in the game. But the reality is they don't all want to do that. The point about being in the box, the consulting, and I haven't heard the word partnership. It's partnership. It's beyond the transactional side that the OEMs are trying to get. You're right. They want licensing. I could tell you stories, but I'm under NDAs. But they want bigger numbers. And again, service is an obstacle to bigger numbers because but the perspectives, and I think that's it. As you talked about, Wayne said, industry. You got to find people that align to prior knowledge. They're going, I could figure that out. That's not the right guy. You want the person that's been through it not once, twice, multiple times, because they have a purview. The OEMs, they're going to be narrow. They're not going to have all that industry diversity and familiarity, but that is a key attribute, and it's a big difference. I mean, and again, you're right. The contracts with the partner, and again, you're going to get accountability there. And the Microsoft, the back eye agreement, it's the end user licensing agreement. It's not much more than that. And if you read those, they say, well, we hope it works. We'll try to make it work, and if it doesn't work, sorry, we tried. And that's about as good as you're going to get on an end user licensing agreement, and they'll try to fix it. But if it doesn't work, it's, it says we don't make any right. And so that it is what it is. And a lot of times you end up having to have the partner help you remediate issues that may be in the product, and you're not going to necessarily get recourse with the OEMs. Even if you're dealing with direct, they're big. They need to do volume. Dealing with the end user compromises their overall scheme of things. So again, if you're a huge enterprise and you're global and you want skin in the game, but like I said, based on my experiences in the past, you're better to secure a strong contract with your partner. And as Bonnie said, you need scope. You need very detailed scope. And as Melissa said, it's about outcomes. It's about outcomes. It's not about user license. It's about what am I going to get? How do we contractually articulate the outcomes? So to me as a business owner, I know what the world looks like tomorrow on the other side of this project. And I can count on that ROI that I did, right? And you're measuring. How do we do? How do we measure? Do we know the front end, the back end? Hey, we actually did what we said we were going to do, accomplished what we said we were going to do. So again, just more conjecture on that. But I mean, there's, like I said, the OEM direct, there's a lot of partners. or companies that have direct, but part of that's because they're not patient with the partner selling the solution. So why does NetSuite sell direct? Well, we need to sell more. Partners are too slow. Build an inside Salesforce. So there is a madness to why they're doing that is they want more volume, and they may be frustrated that the rate of new deals from the partner channel doesn't meet their expectations. I know that's Microsoft's problem. They want more volume, and they're grabbing everybody trying to get more volume. And the constraint is services. And moreover, finding qualified people that have the experiences to deliver the services in a consulting fashion, right? That's where we listen, and we actually have solutions that really deliver better than average outcomes. So.
Yeah, so you definitely bring, Wayne, go ahead, please.
I just want to say we're acting like there are two different pools of people. If I'm a manufacturer, an OEM, and I want to staff my professional services group, I don't take people out of the programming department and throw them in front of customers. I hire the same pool of people that the consulting companies are hiring, and they go back and forth. In fact, there's a three-way movement. They go from the client to the consultant. They go from the consultant to the vendor. They go from the vendor back to the end user customer.
Mhm.
It's the same group of people. It's people who can actually have a thoughtful, intelligent conversation with business people and then write technical specs, get through test cases and plans, and deliver a project on time. I want to make one point too. It's very important. We're acting like, it seems, we're going to hire somebody and they're going to do the project for us. I tell my clients, outsource the hardware, outsource the software, but you can't outsource your brains. You must maintain your own control regardless of who you hire. Don't say, well, they have a PMO, so they're going to do it. No, you got to keep them honest. You got to keep the consistency. To the point that several have made, it's hard to get a consistent vendor team, whether it's an OEM or a VAR or an ISV, for the life of an 18-month project. You have a better chance of getting your own internal PMO or the value realization team or transformation team staffed more consistently. Keep the locus of control within your company, and then you can wheel in and out various players to get the outcome you need.
Okay, amazing. Martin, you had a comment. I guess you are going to have interesting comment as well on Wayne's comment now.
Yeah, so it comes down to you've got to look at what the different motivations of the different players are. And we talked a bit about that before, the OEM motivation versus the consulting company motivation. So that comes into it. As Wayne says, you need to actually keep as much of the intellectual property piece, the bit that makes your company special, internal. Because otherwise, you get consultants coming in wherever they come from. They build up all this knowledge, and they deliver this project, hopefully successfully, then they leave. Then what are you going to do? So you need to actually maintain that knowledge and that understanding as much as possible internally. Yes, you're going to need outside help to help you think about it in the right way, help you structure it in the right way, to learn from other companies, learn from the industry, all of those pieces, and bringing that extra expertise in. But you need to have good people on your side. And if I look at one of the projects we did, massive ERP, it wasn't an upgrade. The old one was so old, it was a totally start again, throw it away. Yeah, we had a team of over 50 people, and that was at least half business people on our side. And then there was kind of like 10 from the IT side and 10 consultants. And that's a pretty good mix, because you've got so much re-engineering and process work you need to do there. And the change management aspects, all of those pieces, you need that external help, but you need to actually, get the people to be trusted. And by bringing the expertise, the SMEs in from your own businesses, that helps to build that trust as you go through the project. Because at the end of the day, you've got to get the change management to work, because none of the software or other integrations are relevant at all if you're not going to get the adoption and you're not going to do the change management right. You can forget the rest of it. It becomes a piece of software sitting on a shelf.
Yeah, so one of the comments that I wanted to address, and that is going to be related to overall how the organizations are structured, and that is very important for this discussion, OEM versus the consulting firms. So if you look at the overall organization, I have been part of one of the OEM organization, and typically if you look at the OEM organization, the way you have the professional services organization and the product organization, majority of the people who are part of the organization, especially the brighter talent, they all want to be part of the product because they make more money there. It's just cool to be there. It's just better, exposure, better resume. So the company is not really incentivized to train, to build the same professional services organization that a consulting company is going to have. And there is another aspect of churn, Bonnie, that we addressed in our episode, that since you are not going to have those names on the contract, you are actually going to experience a lot of churn overall during the course of the project. And we actually hear from a lot of customers that they actually work with the direct consulting services, but there were at least 5 changes. Sometimes they'll call the call center and they would not even know who they are speaking with. They don't even have a dedicated project manager or dedicated point person to be able to deal with. So Bonnie, do you want to touch on the churn aspect and how the organizations are overall built and compensated from the OEM perspective?
Yeah. So we ask a question during a project postmortem through our reviews, and that is, how often did your team change, or did it change? And if it did change, how often?
Yep.
In pretty much 60% of these projects, there was churn, whether it was churn at the customer site, that's less often, or churn from the vendor or the SI side. And there's different factors for that. I mean, there's the typical ones where you have people who leave the company or get new jobs and things like that. Those are to be expected. But the most troublesome ones are the churn when, let's say, an SI will take and put a project lead on a different project. Maybe they signed a big new contract and all of a sudden they need their A resources. So that happens. So, as much as you can control what you can control, I love what Wayne had to say earlier about that. You can control your internal team and make sure that that stays intact. As much as possible, you want to check the track record of an SI if you're using a third party to see how often have they changed out resources on other customer projects. And you can certainly find that information, on a rating site like Raven Intel. And see that sort of turn. From a OEM perspective, or the software vendor side of things, the best resources in their professional services team, if they are really good, are prime poaching targets for consulting firms.
Yeah.
So if you get a really tenured, good implementation resource that's working for a software vendor, chances are they're going to get recruited away by the best consulting firms who will probably pay them a whole lot more. And I mean, there's enough churn that happens from consulting firm to consulting firm, but the easy targets are the A players at a software vendor, because those are folks that are sort of like working in a software environment when they really are best suited for project management in a larger sort of capacity. So I'd say in terms of churn, that's typical.
Yeah, Melissa, you had a comment. Please go ahead.
Yeah, I this totally resonates. When we look at the resourcing, I mean, I think we've moved into this. When we look at resourcing between the OEMs and the consultants, the OEMs are very product specific. Okay, you're going to have 3 modules, so we're going to give you a resource for this module, a resource for this module, a resource for this module. By the time you look at it, you've got 10 people on your project, but only each one of them knows that specific module. They don't understand how it all aligns together. When you look at the consulting resources, they're looking at it from a process perspective. So you're getting a resource that understands this piece of the puzzle. And then on top of that, they're aligning it with what we call 2 in the box. So one person from the consulting side, one person from the client side, connected together with that process. They're there to walk through the journey from the beginning to end. They're making those low risk decisions together, and thay going to be all the way through, versus going back to your OEM resources. They just get the focus of that process or that module, and they only may be allocated, going back to your contract, they only may be allocated on your project for 10 weeks for that module. And then this module, this guy's going to be on your project for 14 weeks for this module. Well, you can't have any consistent thread of knowledge if they're only on your project for 1/3 of the total project lifecycle.
And to add to that point, as we're talking about this churn, the reason it's so bad, other than personalities, I mean, it takes time to gel as a group, is that knowledge transfer. And so much of the time, if things weren't documented effectively, that makes that knowledge transfer even worse. So it can be less painful to have a change if you had somebody who was doing great documentation and can onboard this new project team member. But that's one of the other sort of things that, outside of mitigating change in terms of people, making sure that documentation happens throughout the life of the project. So God forbid, when you have those changes, they're easier on you than, all of a sudden it's a big.
Okay, amazing. Some great points there. So, Wayne, do you have any comments with respect to churn, as well as the way the organizations are structured and the coaching of the best talent from the OEM to consulting companies?
Yeah, I do. clearly the top tier consultants can pay more, but they put you on the partner track, which also can ruin your life. I've known people on that track at law firms, on big project firms. One of the benefits of working for a software company is it's a little different pace. So there are people who have quality of life issues. There are people who want to work in a more collegial environment. And there are people who like turning the product, quite frankly, they see as the geeks in the basement, churn out the code, and these people are delivering the value. So I think we have to recognize something. We talk about these companies like they're monolithic. This is not, Satya Nadella sitting at the top going, I think we'll put bad people over in the professional services group. They hire a senior vice president or a group vice president who makes a boatload of money to deliver a quality product to get customers happy. Because by the way, if everybody says company X has great software but does a terrible job putting it in, that gets reflected in their scores, that gets reflected to Bonnie's company, and people don't buy from them. There's somebody making 7 figures, maybe 8 figures at the top of each of these major OEMs, driving that quality in their organization. And I know I've worked with Microsoft more than the others. Microsoft gives their systems integrators a template to implement. They try to make it easier for them. SIs don't have to follow it, but Microsoft has lots of resources. SAP has resources. Salesforce has resources. So they're trying to deliver a very professional product. The product is not code in a box. The product is a happy customer. So recognize that. When you're dealing with the people, if you've got the good people and you make the right connections, you wind up having a quality implementation team. And I'll say the 2 in the box that Melissa commented on, if your organization is not committed from the board of directors down, if we're talking about a full ERP, you will fail. I hate to be dismissive, you will fail. It's not about getting a whole bunch of clerks in a room and going, they're better clerks than these clerks. It's getting your subject matter experts, your process owners, your business managers, and your cheerleaders, what we call the C-suite and the board, all pulling in the same direction to deliver a cultural transformation as well as a technology transformation.
Yeah, I think this is really important, Wayne. Yeah, and this is about change management. If you think back to like John Cotter, he says that guiding coalition, that forming that partnership of the senior leadership, and it starts at the very top. If you want to be successful with this, you've got to start there, and it has to be all the way down, and it has to flow through all levels of leadership as well. If you're not, then what happens is it starts to fragment. You get disagreement. You get people who are not going to step up and put their SME, the best SMEs on there. And I've often said to customers and to businesses I've been working with, do you want your best person to design your processes for the future you're going to live with for the next 20 years? Or do you want that person you hired the other day who doesn't actually know how you work? And I think that's critical, yeah. And you often get the problems of where you maybe get the all this kind of great momentum at the start, and you get the good people, but then things start happening in the business, and they get a problem in the business. They get a new customer they're trying to satisfy in the business, and some of those best people get pulled back into the day-to-day. And that's often when the projects start to fail. And it's how do you kind of keep that kind of that momentum, that coalition of the senior leadership through the duration of this project. And these projects can be long at times and too long. They can take over people's lives. And you have to keep that momentum going. You have to keep the good people involved. You have to keep them enthused and keep driving it, because that's absolutely critical to a lot of this, to success.
So
Martin's right. I have a slide that I use for executive presentations. It said the only people I want on this project are the people you don't want to give me. Because what happens is everybody, what's known as colloquially passing the trash. Oh, okay. This person's not producing. Let's put them on the ERP team. And eventually those chickens come home to roost, to keep mixing metaphors. The people I want are the ones you can't spare. And we've only got an hour to cover this, but the real key on building one of these projects is flex resource. I've got to say, if I need 1 controller and 2 assistant controllers, I may need to budget. I've got a project where we budgeted $350,000 for backfill in 1 finance department because we knew it was a 2-year project. We wanted to bring in a partner level accounting person so that controllers could be free 2 days a week if needed to opine and help and test and everything else. You cannot assume you're going to do it without resource. And you cannot assume, I'll just hire somebody to do it. And by the way, to Martin's point, do I want the new person or do I want the most senior person? The answer is I want them both. Because what I don't want to do is keep implementing the same company I have today tomorrow. Companies are better and better at being themselves. I want somebody with a new idea partnered with that person that knows the folklore, the history, the culture. Why did we do it? Why do we do it this way? I want that coalition of somebody that's an expert in how best practices work and somebody that knows why we did it this way on purpose or accident.
So some excellent point, guys. I just want to make sure that I'm painting some colors here to make sure that we are staying on the topic here, which is going to be OEM versus the consulting companies.
Right.
And one of the points you made, Wayne, is regarding this having the com structure as part of the OEM, where they have these templates, where they are going to drive the process. But if you really think about it, the way majority of the OEMs work is they are going to have template, but if there is going to be a problem in the implementation, they are going to bring back 5 different partners, and they are simply going to change the partner. So as such, OEMs are covered. I mean, for them, it's not a problem at all. The only thing they are doing is they are simply changing the partner. You don't like this, company, you can go to the next. But from the customer perspective, let's say if I'm the manufacturing executive, now what I need to do is I need to retrain this new company. Okay, I need to invest a lot more than the forecasted budget that I have for my project. So for me, it's a huge risk. When I'm changing these partners, when I'm changing these companies. So as a manufacturing executive, I need to be aware of these issues. If there are going to be any changes, even though you are mandating that, I have your performance metrics and I'm going to ensure that, my partners are measured based on their performance. But in the real world, no two implementations are same. And this is the point that we covered, during our conversation, Bonnie, that, there are going to be a lot of companies where they may have failed, let's say 80 implementations. And the only implementations they might have is just 2 of them. And they are going to provide some of the references of just those 2 customers. And they are going to claim that, whatever they have done so far just works, and based on that they might want you to decide that, okay, these are my references, and just decide based on that. So sometimes there is a bias overall in the community based on the number of installations or based on the number of references. Typically the ERP implementation is going to be far more complex overall, the way it works. So just looking at these 2 factors, driven by a lot of different OEM companies, that, I have installed this 5,000 times. Hey, it's going to work for you. That's very rarely a case. So Bonnie, I actually want to go back to some of the discussions that we have had during the episode regarding the bias towards these happy references, and some of the things about the template, especially the partner change issues.
That's a big deal. You talked about churn. You talked about staff churn. Partner churn is an even bigger problem. I mean, you think about costs, slowing things down, but yeah, in Bonnie, your stat on 60%, I deal with it. It is one of those things. We do eat some overhead and transitioning somebody in, so we are pretty good about that, about covering some expense there. We'll allow hours so that nobody's upset about that. But the partner churn it goes back to, you said a lot of things. Can we get staff bios that are going to be on the team? What is the criteria to throw your partner out and change partners? That's a nightmare. So again, as you think about mitigating those, it still goes back to front-end partner selection. And the other comment about the OEMs you made about the same people, yeah, the OEMs are using partners to do those projects. So Don't be confused that we're a subcontractor and we're right back out there and you're like, oh, no, we're turnkey. Oh, why didn't I come direct? I don't know. But anyway, so it is the same people. And I think it's kind of funny, but as you go back to that, still get the right guys the first time, get the right group in there, do the due diligence as much as you could get in the contract, as much as allow, but you do want that accountability and on the resources, and you want some kind of provisions for churn, because it's a big deal. But in the end, we're still back to the key question: consultants versus the OEMs. I think we agree that consultants bring a lot more to the table. Again, you want OEM to have skin in the game. How do you do that? Like I said, it's still a slippery slope, but the emphasis on picking the right partner is still imperative, no matter what solution you're looking at, no matter what product line. So I think you're going to get a better relationship, and it's going to endure, and they're going to know more about your business, and you're going to build trust. And again, you hope that relationship endures, because you don't want to start over, and as I would say. So,
yeah. Sam, there's actually a really good question that we haven't asked yet, which is, what is the role of the OEM? I mean, we've gone through the whole conversation, and I think we can come back and now address for the audience. Okay, well, now that we've answered this, where does that OEM come into play? Where are they most suited and most valued in that transformation journey? And I think that would be a great topic to hear everybody's thoughts on.
Yeah, I agree. Yeah, Wayne, go ahead, please.
So I think about it this way: it's depth versus breadth. If I want depth of knowledge, the OEM will generally have it and provide more. If I want breadth, I've got to look at processes end to end and incorporate other things into my mix. I might want to go to an outside firm. So I think that's the key. The other one is certainty versus uncertainty. I want that product implemented this way. I get the vendor to put their team on it. They're listening to me. If I'm not sure what the process is supposed to look like when we're done because I need best practice experience, then I probably want to go to an outside company that makes their name on best practice processes, not on implementing their version of the truth. So depth versus breadth, certainty versus uncertainty.
Okay, amazing. Martin, do you have any comments with respect to overall role of the OEM by any chance?
No, I think that's a great point that Wayne's making there, that depth versus breadth. And we talked about it earlier, the OEM and the product knowledge side of things. And I've even had projects where we've brought in an outside consulting company, but we've also brought in expertise in key areas from the OEM as well to supplement the team where we need that additional depth. So it's not a one or other type situation necessarily. Yeah, a hybrid model often works as well, depending on what you need. And it comes down to, as we said before, on the needs of the particular project you've got, what you're trying to do and how you're trying to do it.
Okay, amazing. Bonnie, go ahead, please. You are on mute, by the way. Sorry.
Thank you. And I think, as you think about this choice, OEM versus consulting firm or SI, what I think is if you can do more upfront definition of your problem and make sure that you are really sort of setting yourself up for success before you get into the weeds and choosing the software and the technology and should I do a consulting firm versus OEM, I think it makes sense to even take a step back and say, what is my problem here? Am I solving the right problem? Before talking about, solutioning it and bringing people in to, come up with their approach to helping you solve your problem. I think it will make your process a lot more efficient if you, really spend some time internally sketching out what is it I'm trying to solve and making if it's a big enough problem, breaking up your problem into bite-sized pieces and not trying to do everything all at once. This whole idea of like a huge project, it just is so unwieldy and lengthy to control and, and all those things. You can create projects that are smaller in nature and easier to control within a defined time and scope. I think that really, that'll help you be more efficient in your selection process and not have so many differing opinions once you start bringing in outside firms.
Yeah, so some great points there. Sorry, go ahead, Martin.
I was going to say 100%. An old manager of mine way back in the 80s once said to me, we want dolphins, not whales. And if you think about a whale jumping out of the water, the big leap, whatever else, whereas dolphins tend to do the small, when you're doing these types of projects, the more you can break it down and do it in dolphins, not whales, the better.
Okay, amazing point there. So guys, I want to cover one point before we close, and that is going to be this notion of, and obviously this is also around breaking down the project, but at the same time, when we look at some of the sales teams, if the sales team is actually involved in selling the license and they are not the ones who are actually implementing the project, or they have never actually implemented a project in their life, sometimes it could be a very tricky situation to be in. So, and there is this notion, especially in the small to medium sized businesses these days, a lot of companies claim that they can implement an ERP within 45 days. If again, I'm talking about an implementation person who has really done this. I don't think anybody is going to be confident in implementing an ERP project within 45 days just because of the amount of effort involved in process mapping, doing it right, understanding the business. It's just not possible. But we look at this notion in the small to medium-sized businesses these days that, you know what, I can implement this in 45 days. The sales team is going to commit this because this is really used as a sales tool. And once the project is going to be handed over to the implementation team, and they are going to say, you know what, this is definitely not possible.
Yep.
Even though these two people are from the same organization. Okay, they belong to the same organization. They are going to say that this is what we are going to do in 45 days. And after that, I am going to be billing you, $350 an hour, $250 an hour, whatever the cost is going to be. And obviously, at that time, you will not be in a position to negotiate because you are already locked in the contract. You have already implemented, that solution for 45 days. So I want your thoughts on this aspect that, a lot of places I have seen this in a lot of different ecosystems. Melissa, do you have any comments there?
I got stories. I got tons of stories on this one. What I find this scenario happens more often than not. I find that it's not done intentionally. The salesperson is talking their sales language, their terminology. The client is trying to ask a question using their process, their terminology, and there's just a disconnect. And so when the salesperson says, yes, we can do that, the client's thinking, yes, they can, but come to find out they were thinking something completely different. So then I come out and I'm saying, working with the client, and they're saying, well, I bought it from the provider, the OEM said it can do this, and this. Let me go back and check on that because it didn't do it last week, so I don't know how it's going to do it this week. And in the end, it's getting everybody back at the table again and putting everybody back on the same page, remanaging all their expectations, and make sure that the client's comfortable that it was just a disconnect. But don't worry, the three of us, we're going to get together and we're going to help you get to where you need to go. But oh my gosh, yes, this happens a lot.
I was just going to say, make sure you get it in writing in the contract of what it will provide.
Yeah.
And we've had situations where we've had sales guys put things that it will do this on the PowerPoint. And we've actually gone back from a big OEM and actually got a large amount of money back towards the project because of having to manually build interfaces, integrations that they were told us were going to be there.
Yeah, and I don't think, you are going to get that written in the contract. And sometimes there is going to be a lot of sales brush off. Just because these contracts are designed to be trickier to read, they are not easy at all.
That's why you need a good lawyer.
I'll just say, too, I had one client where we recorded all the sales presentations. It was all done via Teams. We recorded them all. And then whatever the salespeople said a year later, we could go back, listen to the recording, and play it back for their company. And say, but this is what they said in this meeting at minute 16 and a half.
Not necessarily contractual if they utter something like that. You just have to be careful that you really have to do your due diligence to get them to document it. Yeah. I have a team that wants a project internally, and they sent me a contract, and I look at the scope of work. I go, where's the scope? I go, okay, get the scope in there. Send them back to work the contract. And I think that's a lesson for everybody listening is work the contract. Don't feel like you have to hurry up and sign the thing. Sales guy, but tell him to bring in the solution architect that really knows the product and have him validate all the BS that the sales guy says. Because, and again, why are they saying it takes less? Because they're doing the math going, oh, we can only sell 10 deals because our service team will be overloaded. So if we make them all 6 weeks projects, we can sell 4 times as many deals. It's the same thing. Microsoft wants to give you an easy button. 1 week, you're up and running in 1 week. It's baloney. It's all sales hype. And I was like, oh, really? No, it doesn't work that way. So just don't believe it. And I think to be a skeptic is okay because, to your point, even the smallest projects take 3 months because by the time you start talking about it, get your people organized, get some people learning, knowledge transfer, you take ownership, you build confidence, it's not going to be quicker than 3 months. So don't lie to yourself.
I'm sure Wayne and Chris will both agree with me on this one, and Melissa and Bonnie as well, I'm sure, which is don't believe anything a software vendor's salesman ever tells you until it's proven.
Yeah. We're from Missouri. Show me. Come on, show me.
Exactly.
We totally are believed. I'm going to show you so that it's not all.
That's just not software vendors. That's vendors in general.
Okay,
Hey guys, we are about time right now, and some of you may have meetings, right? So we want to make sure that we close on time. Guys, do you have any one sentence closing advice from this session? I am going to do a quick round, just one sentence, please. Wayne, can you go ahead, please, Wayne?
If you're the CFO making a decision, recognize one size doesn't fit all. Get somebody with scars to advise you, and then make a decision that suits your need in your company for your situation.
Amazing. Love it. Thank you so much, Wayne. One sentence, Martin.
If you're going to do something like this, make sure you've got your own house in order before you get started.
Amazing. Love it. Chris, one sentence, please.
The devil's in the details. Make sure the scope and the deliverables are in your agreement. And check references. Make sure you're talking to the guys that are the right guys.
Love it. Melissa, one sentence, closing advice.
Yeah, in these projects, there's a lot of prep work. Do the prep work first before you get the consulting firms or the OEMs on site.
Amazing. Bonnie, one sentence, closing advice.
Trust but verify. And the best way to know how good a firm is talk to their previous customers and hear their stories.
Amazing. Love it. And my personal takeaway is going to be research, research, and research. The more informed you are, the better and easier path you are going to have. On that note, guys, I really want to thank you for your time. This has been a powerful discussion. And audience, if you are joining for the first time, we meet every Thursday at 4:30 p.m. and we pick one of the topics related to digital transformation. Thank you so much for joining. I really appreciate each of you.
Great.
Thanks, everybody. Nice meeting you all.
Bye-bye.
Take care.